Okay, so we're here today with Lisa Rios, a veteran of the NYU Stern admissions office with 13 years of experience here. And we're here to talk about NYU Stern and the admissions process. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, let's just start with a broad opener. You know, what's going on at NYU right now that you're excited about?
Oh my goodness, so many things. Well, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about is something that I'm participating in personally, even though I'm in admissions, I wear some other hats around the school. And this Friday, I'm wrapping up my year-long cohort with the Leadership Fellows program. And this is a program that is part of our Leadership Accelerator, which is a center that's run and founded by Professor Nate Pettit. And it has a whole slew of opportunities for students to develop their leadership skills. This program in particular is in small cohorts, and they work together throughout the year. They bring in executive speakers to share their experiences, both positive and negative, in being a leader. And it also puts students in simulations where they are forced to navigate difficult conversations and push themselves outside of their comfort zone. So this Friday is our last session of the year, and I'm so excited to see them. They've come so far and grown so much in ways they probably don't even realize.
Okay, I think you might have just answered one of my later questions, which I always love to ask people about. What are the experiences like a school is known for? Well, let's go here. Okay, you know, NYU Stern. I think if you were to play word association with people, you'd say like NYU Stern, they'd say finance. But I mean, these schools are so much more broad than they were, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. So what are some of the other areas that you know that NYU Stern takes pride in that maybe people don't immediately associate with the school?
I would have to say experiential learning, and it's been around at Stern for almost as long as 23 years. I think we celebrated our 20th anniversary just last year. But it kind of goes into in line with the ethos of the Leadership Accelerator, in that us grown-ups learn better from experiences, and giving students the opportunity to put into practice what they're learning in the classroom with real organizations, with real people, because they're absorbing that knowledge better. And so the Office of Student Engagement and our experiential learning team have so many different offerings that range from something called the Endless Frontier Labs, where our students are essentially helping startups get their foot off the ground. They are in the healthcare space, and there's an application process for these startups to be a part of it. And if they're chosen, they get to work with our students and hopefully get to the next round of seed funding, which is pretty incredible. Other opportunities could include being on the board of a local nonprofit, giving students that bird eye view of what it's like to be in the governing body of a nonprofit. Even students that have worked in the social sector have found it to be an interesting experience, because they probably did not have that senior level experience at the top, or it might just be a different organization to give them another way of looking at things.
Okay. I guess riffing on the same theme here yet again. So, you know, I think if we think about, when I think about NYU professors, I think about Professor Galloway, I think about Dr. Doom, and I don't know if he likes going by that name or not, but you know, but is there a professor maybe who doesn't carry the big like national or even international profile of those two professors that you think is doing something really interesting, teaching a class in a unique way that you think students might, someone who's trying to, you know, get scratch beyond the surface of what's readily available might be intrigued by?
Well, one that comes immediately to mind is Tansy Whalen, who is not only a faculty member, but also the head of our Center for Sustainable Business. And what's really interesting is that they recently launched a career development program specifically for women looking to go into sustainable finance. And giving them 2 years of support in navigating that landscape, which is pretty unique and exciting. It's called Empower.
Okay. Okay. So for those of you who are looking to learn more about that, you can dig in online. Also, so let's talk about let's jump into the admissions process, because that's the main handiwork. So one thing I found interesting is that Stern has been a real leader in diversifying the various test options. So a bunch of questions on that topic, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you can do the GMAT, the GRE, the EA, the LSAT, the MCAT, the DAT. You could apply for a test waiver. I think the only test maybe that you can't pass, you pass a driver's test. Maybe that's not allowed, but it seems like every other test is permissible. For a corny dad joke there. What have been some of the learnings what do you, from an LSAT test taker or an MCAT test taker, are you evaluating their files any differently? And if you have some data, on, I don't know how, I guess this would be the entering class who would have that. So maybe there isn't data on performance yet, but if there is some data on performance, can we learn anything from the data of those you've admitted with alternative tests at this point?
Well, I'll say to take a step back first, the reason that we did this was to offer options. And we had started doing this a number of years ago when we first started taking the GRE. We were one of the first schools to step into that space. And it really was about convenience and options for the candidate. That test in particular had been offered in more locations at more times. And so students had a choice. They could pick the one that they felt most comfortable with. Across all of these options, we've seen that they are good indicators of somebody's academic readiness. Some of those tests that you shared in your example are tests that we have taken from our dual degree students for numbers of years. And so we're not unfamiliar with that.
Right. And in taking something like the EA, where there's less guidance, what do you have to say about, should a student worry? Because I think we all sort of have a sense of what a GMAT average is, or a GRE average now is becoming a little bit more clear after about a decade of taking that test. But if you're thinking about the EA, I think the concern always among applicants is, well, what if I'm negatively identifying myself by taking the test, which is silly, I think, because why would you offer a test to negatively identify someone? But what do you say to the applicant who is thinking about taking the LSAT or the EA? I think is probably a little more mainstream, the LSAT at this point.
Right. I would say take the test that you are most comfortable with and think that you can perform best in. If you're not looking to go to law school ever, then I don't know that I would go and take the LSAT. But that's more for folks that may have considered law school or are also applying to law school. And to do the one that you're most comfortable with. I think you're exactly right. We wouldn't offer these options if it was going to be negative. In fact, we're looking to give candidates a way to put their best foot forward and to show their academic readiness, regardless of whichever test they take. So for us to offer options that would show a negative weight on a candidate would be silly.
Right. Do you think do you foresee a day where testing goes away? Do you think there'll always be a rule for testing in the process?
Oh my goodness, if I had a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we're learning a lot from this experience, and we're also learning a lot from what's going on the undergraduate side of things, because they're doing their own experimentation in this space to see how candidates like it and how it supports the admissions process.
Right. Okay. So admissions offices, they always talk about how their admissions officers tend to universally say, we're trying to create a diverse class, diverse experiences, nationalities, etc. How much of the shaping of a class is done before the year starts? You're okay, we talk and we're trying to figure out, what our class is going to look like, and how much of it is fortuitous in terms of who comes through the pipeline? Are there, at the beginning of the year, you're saying hey, we hope that our class is going to look this diverse at the beginning of the year?
We have to navigate the pool that we get. We have no idea. And every year the applicant pool looks very different. And every year things happen, like global pandemics, and then we have to adjust. I feel very fortunate to be a part of a team that is able to adapt and move with what's going on in the space, and that we can have some good conversations about what makes the most sense for the class and for the school. And so it can vary year to year, to be honest.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that maybe there are some broad intentions, but then you have to evaluate the pool, and kind of it's a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not a shell game. It's the wrong analogy, but there's some iteration going on there as you go.
Yeah, I think we have a plan,
Yeah.
but then we wait and see what the applications look like that we get. And our process is a rolling process as well. We don't have closed rounds. And so that means I'm constantly just moving through applications and looking for those that I think are going to be strong participants and engaged students in the classroom.
Right. And so, yeah, so NYU has an unusual system with more rounds than typical and rolling. I mean, what's the thought process behind that? And you know, should an applicant be saying to themselves like, oh, round 3 is round 2 here, or is round 1, like, you know, what applicant's perspective, how should they be evaluating it?
I think the good thing about our process is that folks don't have to wait for a deadline to submit their application. And when they do submit their application, we'll start reviewing it. So I always say, don't feel like if you're ready 2 weeks before the deadline that you need to wait. Go ahead and submit it. And also don't rush to submit it to meet a deadline just to meet a deadline if you really should take a couple extra days to look it over. Really make sure you're putting your best foot forward.
I can ask you to hang on for 1 second. Okay, great. So this is live. We have to take a second break there. Okay, so you know, another question about the Stern process that I think is a little bit different is the EQ endorsement. I'm curious if you know there's been kind of has that changed the composition of the class, or fundamentally changed the evaluation process since introducing that about 4 or 5 years ago?
I think that timeline's right.
Yeah.
I think it has emphasized the importance of the EQ in our student body. We look for it through the application process. We get it through the EQ endorsements. We get it through, which I'm sure you'll bring up, our Big 6 essay. We get it in the interview, and then we take that and we take the class and we continue to develop that skill while they're here, because it's something that recruiters are telling us all the time they appreciate in our students and that they're looking for more and more. A lot of times technical skills can be taught, but this natural ability in how to work with and care for and manage others is priceless.
Right, right. Okay, let's talk about the Big 6 essay.
Since I brought it up.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of morphed a little bit, sort of cheekily called, like, you know, the Instagram essay by some. So, you know, I mean, what makes for a good one? I mean, you know, I'm sure it's not, you know, just like photo quality or like, you know, something spectacular. But so when you read one, what makes you stop and go like, oh, this is really interesting?
When it feels genuine. And folks can use any image they want. They could use a photo,
Right.
They could use a drawing, they could use charts, whatever comes to mind. But when it feels like it's real and it's coming from them, that's where it gets really interesting, because folks tend to open up and share sides of themselves that doesn't come through in the rest of the application. It becomes less about, I did A, B, C, and D project, or I was promoted 3 times, or here's my undergraduate successes. But it's more about the things that like bring them joy, which is fun to see.
So it seems like you're a fan and you're going to keep it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I can't speak for my whole team, but it's one of my favorite parts of the application.
How does that do you reevaluate the application process itself every year and say, we're going to change that, or we want a little more of this?
Absolutely. We keep things in mind throughout the year as stuff comes up, new questions arise. And then typically after our last application deadline, we will take our app down and start doing our annual updates, which is the point in the process that we're in right now.
Right. So talk about how you, like, when you pick up a file, do you just read it sequentially from the beginning to the end? Do you start with someone's resume? Is there some way that you read a file itself?
Everyone has a different way about it. I it's funny because I was here when we had paper applications.
Oh my
And
God.
back then I probably didn't read it in order because I could put things around. But now that we're online, I do tend to read it in order. But that may not be the case for everybody.
What are your personal red flags? What are the things that just really set you off? You're like, can't do it.
I mean, there's no one deal breaker. And there's no magic formula. Everybody who comes into the class is different, and they add some special ingredient to the makeup of the class. I know there's like the urban legends out there, like, don't put a spelling error. And let me tell you, when we talk to current students or alumni, they're like, nope, deal breaker, kick them out. Like, but you've made spelling mistakes, I'm sure. But yeah, there's not one thing where I would like cut it off and say no way.
So I don't even know if I have a question here, but I think what you've just said is an important point, which is your perspective is, would it be fair to say your perspective is not, let's find a narrow reason to keep someone out, but like, let's give people a chance. Like you're not, I think there's a sense among applicants, this is a smoke-filled room, and that, you know, Lisa or whoever is in charge is like, you know, looking really critically, saying like, let's just find a reason to, you know, make sure Jeremy doesn't get in here. But that's not the case. You're a good person.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's actually the opposite. It's that we are trying to find reasons to bring someone in for an interview and to give them a chance to be a part of the class. You know, I always say that you cannot work in admissions if you don't like people and you don't like their stories. And really, our entire team is here because they're tied to the idea of a mission, of giving people a chance to make a change in their life.
Right. So, I mean, the one thing we haven't talked about so far, I think, how do you do an interview these days without talking about COVID at some level? So, you know, how has it shaped the class? And, you know, is there a difference at all in composition from like, has there been like nuance between, you know, COVID application year 1 and COVID application year 2, where you've seen, I don't know, different national representation or different, I don't know, gender representation or professional representation? You know, I'm trying to think, maybe there was, you know, theoretically more people from hospitality in the first year when it was so crazy, and fewer in the second year. I'm making it up, but
yeah,
big long leading question here. I should let you talk.
the first year, so this is in the class that started in fall 2020. There was a lot going on at the time. And in particular, our international students had a lot working against them in getting here and starting their MBA on time. And so Stern was able to make the decision to offer all of our international students the chance to defer admission for 1 year. Not everyone took it, but some did. And so that year, that kind of affected the makeup of the class. That's the biggest change that I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the composition of the pool is like, are there any nationalities that maybe, I don't know, like of international components, like international applicants come back in year 2 in a way, maybe they were a little absent in year 1 or anything like that? Maybe they weren't.
They were able to still enroll at,
I mean,
say, quote unquote regular numbers.
Yeah.
But on the applicant side, no, not necessarily. Not in year 2, and we're still shaking out year 3. Oh my gosh, year 3.
I know, it's hard.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're still in the middle of year 3, so we don't have final indicators yet.
Are there any silver linings in you know, methodology, in, you know, teaching methodology, and like, is there a takeaway, something that's been made permanent that you're like, wow, this is a like a, you know, minor silver lining for this whole horrible experience from an admissions point of view?
For us, absolutely. And by us, I mean admissions. So we do this session for prospective students called a mock application session, where we walk through a made-up application that we created ourselves. And we have the candidates be members of the admissions committee. And then we talk through the pros and cons of this application with them as a way for them to kind of get takeaways and learn how we might evaluate an application. This was something that we had previously done in person in select cities that we traveled to. And typically those tend to be larger cities where you'll get the most attendance. With the pandemic, we brought this online and we were able to reach many more people all around the world regardless of whether or not they lived close to a major metro area. So that is definitely a silver lining. And now that our travel restrictions and whatnot are loosening up a little bit, we're going through the process of trying to figure out what makes sense to do in person and what makes sense to keep virtual. Unfortunately, we can't do everything. We didn't get like double the amount of team during this time. So we're trying to make decisions on what is best for the candidates, and we'll get the most of them this really cool information.
Right. Yeah, like I mean, the life of the admissions officer should be like, oh, I'm in Tokyo Monday, I'm in London Wednesday, whatever it is. You're like, I'm so is there some, which sounds great, and I think it is great, but I mean, would you imagine that the intensity of that experience is won't quite ever rise back up to the pre-COVID era, or do you think that'll just eventually snap back? There'll be receptions everywhere in the world for applicants and all that type of stuff.
I think right now people are really eager to get to meet the schools in person. Yeah. And if they could have us back full force, they would. The thing that we're all probably trying to figure out right now is what are our policies? What are the school's policies? Where can we travel to? How can we travel? What requirements are there for folks who are coming to those events? And we'll see where it goes. I mean, as we've all seen, we all think we're nearing the end of this whole thing, and then another variant comes out. So we're all ready to adapt and go with it. And we know that, if we have to, our virtual events are successful too. So we're just trying to stay positive and stay flexible.
Okay. Last question, and unless you'd like to keep chatting, I mean, obviously a big advantage for NYU Stern is that it's located in New York. I mean, can you talk about the ways that New York City is actively engaged in the educational experience of a student?
Absolutely. So it's not only where our school is located, but it's a part of us. And we take not everything, I shouldn't say everything, but we take a lot of what we do out into the city, and we bring the city into our classroom. So one example, during the pandemic, when the summer of 2020 was coming about and a lot of companies were like, oh no, we can't have interns, we're not even going into the office. What do we do? Our career services team partnered up with our experiential learning team, and they created an opportunity for our students to give back to New York City and help small businesses work through the process for those PPE loans. And so just making sure not only are we in here and taking advantage of the city when things are good, but giving back to it when they need a helping hand. Another cool thing that they do is they partner with Union Square Ventures, so that our students get to meet these early stage startups and learn from that experience. Yeah, it's just a fun, vibrant city to be in. It gives them access to not only recruiting opportunities for their post-MBA jobs, but it also gives them the chance to put some of these things they're learning in the classroom into practice in a real impactful way.
Yeah. And I mean, as someone who lived in New York for almost a decade, it's in such a great neighborhood. I mean, within a great city and a great neighborhood, to be able to, I always wonder if anyone walks out of a learning team meeting or something like that and goes over to the Comedy Cellar and just finishes the night at, listen to world famous comedians crack jokes.
Yes, probably.
That'd be basically what I would try and do every night. Great. I mean, and is there anything we haven't covered that you want to cover today? Anything you think applicants need to know? A message that you try to disseminate as much as possible? Yeah,
I think, if you're curious about it, reach out to us. You can reach out to me. I'm Rios at stern.nyu.edu. You can reach out to the team. I do take vacations too. So if I don't answer, you can reach out to the team at Stern MBA at stern.nyu.edu. We're happy to chat and learn more about Stern, see if it's the right place for you. And then if you think it is, submit an application, because if you don't, you'll never know.
Thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate your time. And this has been illuminating. And yeah, you've been so honest and and offering your email is extremely, extremely generous of you. So thank you on my behalf, on behalf of all applicants out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Have a great
Okay.
afternoon.
You too.